Hello everyone, Paul here from Fixing Foundations. Today we are going to be talking about how you divide when you are using fractions. And the basic principle behind dividing a fraction by a fraction is to take the reciprocal of the fraction that you will be dividing by, and then you multiply the fraction being divided by this newfound reciprocal. And if you're a little confused, don't worry, we are going to go over what that means. So let's say we had 3 over 4. We are going to divide this by 2 over 5. Well, how would we do it? Well, we would start by taking the reciprocal of 2 over 5. And basically all you do to get that is you just flip it over. So 2 over 5 becomes 5 over 2. And now that we have our reciprocal, we are actually in a good place to rewrite our equation. So we write 3 over 4. This doesn't change, but we are going to change this division sign to a multiplication sign. And then we are going to take 2 over 5 and we're going to use the reciprocal instead, which is 5 over 2. So we put 5 here, we put it over 2, and now we basically just multiply 3 over 4 by 5 over 2. So we start by multiplying what's on top. We multiply 3 and 5 together, that gives us 15. And then we multiply 4 and 2 together, and that is going to give us 8. And our final answer is 15 over 8 because this cannot be further simplified. Now, let's go to another example. Let's say we had 4 over 7, and we wanted to divide this by 8 over 9. Well, we would do a very similar thing. We take a look at 8 over 9. We want to get the reciprocal, and to do that, we basically just flip the fraction. So 8 over 9 becomes 9 over 8. And then we're also going to change this division sign to a multiplication sign as well for the next part of this process. So 4 over 7 does not change, but we change the division sign to a multiplication sign, and then instead of using 8 over 9, we use the reciprocal, which is 9 over 8. And now we just multiply these two fractions. We start with what's on top, 4 times 9. This is going to give us 36. And then we do what's on the bottom, 7 times 8. That is going to give us 56. And I believe we can take a 4 out of the top and bottom of these. So let's do that. We divide both by 4, the top and bottom by 4. That is going to give us 9 on top, and then this is going to give us 14 on the bottom. This cannot be further simplified, and 9 over 14 is the final answer. Now, let's go into a slightly different example. Let's say we had 5 over 6, and we wanted to divide this by 3 over 2. Well, here we actually have a fraction where the numerator is greater than the denominator. So this is actually greater than 1. And we are just going to do something very similar. We're just going to take the reciprocal. So we're going to take 3 over 2. We're just going to flip it. That is going to give us 2 over 3. And then we'll also change the division sign when we do the next part of this process. So 5 over 6 does not change, but we get a multiplication sign, and now we use the reciprocal, which is 2 over 3. Then we multiply fractions like we've been doing. 5 times 2 equals 10, and 6 times 3 equals 18. We can take 2 out of the top and bottom, and then this will simplify to 5 over 9, and this is our final answer. Now, let's say we had something like this. Let's say we had 3 and we wanted to divide this by 1 over 2. So now we have a whole number. Well, one thing that may be helpful for us to do is to turn this whole number into a fraction, right? So we'll start by looking at 3. So we'll look at 3, and 3 can actually be turned into 3 over 1, because 3 equals 3 over 1. And that's what we'll use for the next part of our equation, but let's also do the process we've been doing before. Let's take a look at 1 over 2, because we're going to need to get the reciprocal of this, and 1 over 2 will become 2 over 1. This would basically just be 2, but for the sake of this particular example, I'm going to leave it as 2 over 1. Now, let's continue with the process. We're going to put 3 over 1 here. Basically, 3 hasn't changed, but the way we have expressed it has changed. We're going to change this multiplication, or this division sign, to a multiplication sign. And then 1 over 2, that is going to become 2 over 1, because we will be using the reciprocal. And we just multiply fractions, so 3 times 2, that is going to equal 6. 1 times 1 equals 1, and basically this is just 6, because 6 divided by 1 equals 1. And 6 is our final answer. And you will actually notice something interesting here. We divided 3 by 1/2, and we got a number that was larger than 3 after this process was over. We actually got 6. So something to keep in mind when you are dividing by fractions is when you divide by a fraction that is less than 1, then the value of the number being divided by, so this right here, is actually going to increase. And if you come up here, so if you look at the examples that we did before, so let's look at this, right? We had something, we were dividing by a fraction here that was less than 1. We were dividing by 8 over 9. And we started with 4 over 7, and then we ended up with 9 over 14. If you go into the calculator, right, if you were to do 4 over 7, we'll convert it to a decimal. That's roughly 0.57, right? So it's roughly 0.57 or 0.57. And then the final answer we got was actually 9 over 14, which is roughly 0.64. So when we did this process, the value that we initially started with here actually increased over here. Just something to keep in mind when you are dividing with fractions. I'd like to show you one more example before this video is over. I'd like to do 7 over 12, and let's say we wanted to divide this by 4. So now we are dividing by a whole number that we need to get the reciprocal of. So we take a look at 4. 4 actually equals 4 over 1, because any number divided by 1 just equals that said number. So 4 equals 4 over 1, and we can actually flip this into 1 over 4 to get the reciprocal. So we're going to do that for the next part of this, and we're also going to change that division sign to a multiplication sign. So 7 over 12 divided by 4, that is going to equal 7 over 12 multiplied by 1 over 4, and we just multiply fractions. So 7 times 1 equals 7. 12 times 4, that equals 36, and this cannot be... Actually, I made a mistake. 12 times 4 does not equal 36. 12 times 4 actually equals 48. My mistake. But this is going to be our final answer, 7 over 48. And here you can actually see that when we divided by a number that was greater than 1, the value of our fraction went down because we convert 7 over 12 to a decimal. That gives us roughly 0.58, right? So we have roughly 0.58 or 0.58 here. And then 7 over 48. That equals roughly 0.15 or roughly 0.15. So the value here actually went down when we went from this to this. So something else to keep in mind. So when you're dividing with fractions, if the value you are dividing by is less than 1, then the number being divided is going to increase. And if the value you are dividing by is greater than 1, then the number that you are dividing is going to decrease. That is going to do it for this video. If you learned something new, please consider leaving the video a like. If you would like to see more tutorials related to mathematics, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you're interested in online tutoring, check out the description of this video. You may find something helpful.